Good morning, ladies and germs. This is your coronavirus ticker and political update. All right, who still believes that the swan dive into the pavement that the market took last week was all about coronavirus? Who still believes that bullshit? Um, if that's what you think is going on, folks, just uh, go find a friendly shark and ask him to eat you, because that is very clearly not the case. And if last night isn't proof of it, I don't know what is. If the dishonest reporting that you're seeing at this point, even today, this morning, is not evidence that the media is trying to destroy Bernie Sanders along with everybody, well, that by the way is not likely to work very well. But if you don't think that there's chicanery going on here, well, obviously there is. As I pointed out yesterday, the convenient stepping down in endorsements after you already spent all the money, after you already put the boots on the ground, after you in states where Biden had zero infrastructure, zero influence, zero anything. Amazing, just absolutely amazing. And frankly, I'm stunned by much of what I saw in that regard. This isn't over though. And here's an interesting thing. So California, all right. So California has 415 delegates. Okay, very large number. As it stands right now, Biden has a plurality on the total count, 345 to 209 to 269. I'm sorry, not 209, 269 for Sanders. Warren and everybody else. I mean, forget it. All right, butt plug and of course Bloomberg. If I'm reading this right, got a grand total of 6. He's done. Don't bet on him leaving. By the way, at least not right now. But frankly, if he stays in this game at this point, he's crazy. Okay, as far as I can tell, he won absolutely nothing, and that's a problem because he spent $500 million and essentially flushed it down the toilet. I think it's fascinating to watch people do things like this. 90% in jest. I posted a platform and a declaration that I was going to run for president a few months ago. And I had a handful of people, "Oh yeah, you should do it. I'll organize. I'll do this in this state, or yeah, okay." I also said that you'd have to draft me, by the way. And if you did, if the people of this country had done that, if somehow through some fortuitous turn of luck or circumstance or whatever, all of a sudden there'd been people outside my door pounding on it and say, yeah, you need to be president of the United States. And suddenly, this podcast and my tickers went from, having a few thousand listens and views, tens of thousands maybe of reads on some tickers, and my healthcare reform posts that have been up for a very long period of time. The comprehensive plan has about 65,000 views, which by the way is not a bad number. Okay, that's a lot of people have read it. 65,000 people have read that posting and that content. The number of phone calls that I've gotten or emails asking me to appear on a television or radio show to go through it and expound on it, and basically the first phase of what you would call the popular acceptance component of political activity. That is where you get grilled by somebody like Oprah or God forbid, not Chris Matthews anymore because, oops, Uh, yeah, well, I always knew there was something a little off about him. But, the folks from CNN or PMSNBC or good God, CNBS or even Fox, it hasn't happened. Okay. If there was another zero behind that number, maybe it would, because maybe at that point there'd be enough. But even then, I don't think so, because you think about it, it's 330 million Americans, roughly, more or less. Probably, I wonder how many of them actually read and write English. 250 maybe. The rest are either too young, which is excusable, or they Spanglish, which isn't. But it doesn't matter. The fact is that there's at least 1 zero missing, and maybe 2 from that critical mass count. And you have to be a special brand of crazy to think that without that, on a national basis, the Bloomberg, of course, in New York City, it's a different story for him, right? Because he was mayor. But contemplate this. An awful lot of people around the country, myself included, consider New York to be a sewer. And in a socialist hell, any piece of shit, and a whole bunch of other unspeakable things. This is a state that routinely lets people go for doing crazy, outrageously crazy things. Sanctuary cities, the whole 9 yard shooting match. And I have exactly 0 of that sort of recognition, either from a name perspective or anything else. Yeah, okay, I ran an internet company in Chicago in the 1990s. If you were on the internet in the 1990s, you probably at least know my name because, hell, you might even have one of my coffee mugs. I did hand out thousands of those. So, although they didn't have my name on it, they had the company's name on it. But I shook an awful lot of hands back in those days. And so, and actually it's kind of funny. There's, at that time I got some press coverage. I mean, there was an article written not too long after I sold the company that went down what myself and some of the other people who were in competing companies were doing, and basically, pointed out that what I'm doing these days is a whole lot of nothing at that point, because that's kind of what it was. And I guess now I'm sort of doing a whole lot of nothing too, right, from a political point of view, other than public visibility point of view, other than trying to keep the country from going down the chute. But I don't care enough about it to throw all my own money into it, to try to become one of those pigs that feeds at the public trough. And as a result, as I said, the only way that I would go out and do this sort of thing is if I was drafted. Being drafted doesn't come from a handful of people. It comes from some very fervent supporters deciding that they're going to see to it that you get the name recognition and everything else that goes along with it, that essentially you're compelled more or less to take a crack at it. But what about Biden? I think the most sad part of this is what's been exposed in the corruption within our political system by this race so far. And we haven't even gotten to Milwaukee yet. In fact, we're not even close to Milwaukee yet. We've got, we got an awful lot of states that are going to pop up here in the next couple of weeks. Of course, Stupid Tuesday was the kickoff, if you will. Interestingly enough, despite California not having announced their 415 delegates and the real projected split yet, Sanders is ahead by almost 10 points. Now, they at this point, let's see, what percentage is in? I don't have the percent of the vote. Oh, yes, I do. 48%. Okay, so 48% of the vote is in, so about half. Unless there's something very odd with the precincts that aren't. I don't see how you lose when you're up by 10. Right? I just don't see that. And Mini Mike has 15% of the vote there, which means 15.1%, which means there's a possibility he'll actually get a handful of delegates. Possibility. He only needs to slip another 2 ticks to not. So, 2-man race, and isn't it interesting that after all of this, we have a man who is somewhere between a socialist and a Bolshevik, and has had a heart attack while on the campaign trail. All right, good God, if that's not a disqualifier, would somebody please tell me what is? A demonstration of physical frailty that's sufficient to literally threaten your life. Okay? And a senile old man who doesn't know the difference between his wife and his daughter on a debate stage. And who literally confused the two of them last night while giving a speech. Folks, the man has dementia. Okay? And oh, by the way, for all of you woke Democrats, you notice anything about the people that are left in the field? Have you paid any attention to it at all? Is there anything interesting about them? Okay? Looking in California, the top 3, they're all white men. They're all old white men, too, including Bloomberg. Let's go to Texas. What do we got? Biden, Sanders, Bloomberg. Bloomberg, by the way, with 15.1% of the vote, gets 1 pledged delegate. And incidentally, the rest of the pledged delegates haven't been awarded yet. Okay, but Biden looks like clearly is going to win that. And that, by the way, surprises me because that was actually very close. But when I went to bed, it was spitting distance, and Sanders looked like he was going to win. But nope, sorry, about a 3% swing. The particular precincts that were out apparently were ones where people didn't like Mr. Bolshevik, because to overcome that at that point is actually it's a pretty big deal. Sanders got his teeth kicked in Tennessee, which is interesting. 41%, 41.7 to 24.9. And he got drubbed in North Carolina, very similarly to what happened to him in South Carolina. Not quite as bad, but may as well be. I mean, 42.9 to 24.1. That's not close. And Virginia's same deal. The other thing that's a little more interesting is that Massachusetts, Biden wins as well, but not nearly by as much. Okay, so I mean here we're within that 10-point area. And I also thought it was interesting that in Minnesota, Biden won among the Democrats. Now, that one, I wonder how the Somali situation broke there. I'd really love to have a precinct by precinct level breakdown. I think that's very interesting. Okay, in Vermont, of course, Sanders ran away with the game, and also interesting is that he won New Hampshire, of course, which was in February. That was a much closer contest, but one is one, and so the delegate chase continues. Am I surprised that Sanders essentially was rejected in Alabama? No, and here is Sanders' Achilles heel. Okay, if Sanders gets the nomination by whatever means, he loses. And when you look at the split in where he loses and why he loses, it's not because the woke, so-called progressive voters don't like him or reject him. That's not the problem. He loses because black people won't vote for him. And that, I tell you what, if you're African American, if you're black, African American is bullshit. Anything with a hyphen in it is bullshit. American's American, folks. I was having a conversation last night after my run, and it was talking about the coronavirus thing, and white man sanitation good, and the bartender with whom I was having the conversation is not white. And there was this kind of twinge, like, she and I have known each other for a hell of a long time. And there was this kind of twinge, and I said, no, this is a culture thing. This has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It does, however, have to do with who invented what, and the fact that, white men came up with flush toilets, and we put our shit in a toilet, and then we pull the handle, and we put our TP in there too. And I said, and if you've never traveled outside the United States, you just don't get it, okay? And that's okay. I mean, but you need to understand, there's a reason that while we have cases, and we're going to continue to have cases, it's not, it's not going to be the blowout kind of situation that you had in, even in South Korea, say much less this other stuff. So, there you go. I'm just, I'll tell you what. Biden, of course, is going to get a big money boost here, and that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch, how the cash flow shifts coming off this win, and I'm kind of surprised. I thought what was going to end up happening when I went to bed last night, what I saw was Biden was basically going to run the table, except for Texas and California. I thought he was going to lose in Texas. And if he'd lost in Texas, I don't think there would have been any way to stop Bernie. I really don't. I think irrespective, and this, folks, this is just the way it works, okay? I mean, this, by the way, is why you have electoral votes that are split the way they are. Delegates are not split the way that you have, because otherwise, if you win Texas and California, the Democrat contest, and then you win Florida, for all intents and purposes, game's over. All right? You can lose almost everything else, and yet you just need to pick up a smattering of this and that and the other thing in a few other places, and game's done. And if you think about that, that's stupid. But that's, this is why we have EVs, okay? Because at the point that you have 2 or 3 states deciding what happens, you're going to have a revolution, because the rest of the country is not going to accept that. They will violently reject it if they must, and that's going to be a terrible problem. So this is certainly something to think about. It appears, okay, now I'm scrolling through my feed as I'm talking. It appears, by the way, that Omar did not manage, despite endorsing Sanders, did not manage to actually get her county to vote for him. So apparently, Somalis, who, if you didn't notice, tend to have black skin. Okay, they have a lot of melanin in their skin. They don't vote for Bernie. I'm wondering, maybe, just maybe. I've often commented on the plantation nation when it comes to black people and voting for Democrats, who is a party of slavery. But maybe, just maybe, there's just enough in the Bolshevik. They recognize, there's a bridge too far. Just maybe. I don't know. I'm not black, and so I don't, and I've got none of it in me, and so I mean, it's one of those things that I've never understood how Democrats get the black vote, but I do understand if blacks will not vote for Bernie, because Sanders is, I mean, communism never works out so well for minorities. Ask the Uyghurs about that over in China. So, yeah, I mean, there's, there you go. All right, we run way too long on the politics side. Let's talk the coronavirus stuff. You notice that if you scroll down in the news and keep going, you will find that essentially the entire top pattern of the news sites has everything to do with politics and has absolutely nothing to do with coronavirus. Gee, I wonder why. The WHO, by the way, is now saying the fatality rate for coronavirus is 3.4% globally. That is 1.5, again, more than the original estimate of 2. This is, and by the way, the seasonal flu is well under 1%. But here's the thing that bothers me about this. 3.4, by the way, is a very, very bad number. Okay. And this is but again, this is reported cases, and I am very, very, you got to be very careful about taking this and trying to extrapolate it. I don't think so. Okay. This is a unique virus in terms of its spread. I continue to believe this thing got out of their got out of their lab in Wuhan. Okay, my guess is they were working on a SARS vaccine. That's I suspect that's what was going on, and they were doing very dangerous and I wouldn't say completely denounced things, because the United States has played with these studies, but they've been stopped in large part because virologists and other people that deal with this kind of thing have looked at what was going on with some of this work and said, hey, there's a problem here if this thing gets out. If we fuck up, there are going to be a lot of people that die. That is an extremely serious issue, and maybe we ought not fart around with this. All right. The Chinese, of course, being a communist country, don't have these kinds of problems. The other thing is they have a totally different view on the sanctity of life and protecting it. This is something that, folks, we do not share North America. Okay? I don't care what color your skin is. North Americans, and this, by the way, is one of the problems that you have with Central America and the southern part, the Mexicans. All right, this is one of the big issues that for those people that are illegal invaders, and the further you go away from the United States, the worse it gets. So there's a little bit of sharing of this between Mexicans and people in the United States, although not as much as you think. But as you go further down towards Central America, and it's totally gone. Okay, and that is this: the way that we look at life. The way that we just have this basic respect for it, despite all the abortions and everything else. People that are not from this continent, if you're not Canadian, if you're not American, just understand that what we have as an ethos came from the western part of Europe. That's how it got here into the United States. It's been inculcated into the people who live here. All right. Including those who were brought over from Africa that didn't have it originally. All right. But as slaves. But they do now, because all the slaves are dead. And the people who are here were raised, they were brought up in multiple generations for decades, and decades. And now, okay, well over 100 years, 150 years, really, when you think about it. All right, so that's a lot of generations. All of those people were brought up with those cultural components around them. Maybe not necessarily in their parents directly, but around them. They see it every single day. No disrespect meant to people from other parts of the world. All right. But an awful lot of people in this country have never had close contact with and a close association with beyond, hi, how are you? Or maybe you work with somebody from someone, say, from the Philippines. Okay. Not a Filipino American who's been here, for 3 generations. No. Someone who is a Filipino, all right, whose primary identity, I don't care where they live now, is Philippine. Someone who is Chinese, someone who is Japanese, Yeah, even there to some degree. The same sort of view of the world to a large degree does exist in Australia. Why? Because Australia was a British penal colony originally. And so they got inculcated the same sort of thing. New Zealand, the Kiwis, to a large extent, yep, same thing. Of course, all these countries have been importing huge numbers of crazy invaders from parts of the world that have no respect for this kind of thing at all. China is one of those nations, folks. Why was China farting around in a biolab in a careless way? I think at this point we could. It's there. Nobody's admitting it yet, but that virus came out of that lab. Okay, they shouldn't have been doing that work in the first place, and if they were going to do it, they should have been extraordinarily careful. Obviously, that was not true, and now this thing's out. All right. And in a world where we think that everybody's equal and, oh, my God, we got to be egalitarian. We got to allow anybody to get on an airplane, go anywhere, and no, we're not going to control it. This is how you die. This is not the big one, folks. This is a bad bug, but this is not the big one. If we do not slam the door closed and stop this bullshit and make clear to other nations, including the Chinese, especially the Chinese, because China has technological capability that they do not have the necessary thing in their body, in their head, in their minds. They don't have that bug, okay, that says all human life is on top of the list. We weigh all of the things that we do in this country with at least some regard for what happens if we blow it. And we make those decisions. Now, not everybody does, okay? But there's still enough of it left in America. There's still enough. Think about the history of nuclear power, folks. Okay, nuclear power is another one of those things like biological research when it comes to biologic agents that is absolutely intolerant of fuck-ups. It has a unbroken record of being very, very unforgiving when it comes to such things. If you are a stupid asshole and you fart around with nuclear power, you are eventually going to get a lot of people killed. But unlike biological agents, unlike viruses and bacteria and other forms of disease and pestilence, when you fuck up with your nuclear reactor, you lay waste a swath of your countryside, but it doesn't end up in my drinking water when you do it in China or in Russia for that matter. We've had our share of incidents. Okay, we had Fermi 1 outside of Detroit, which incidentally happened when I was a boy and could have killed me. It didn't. My next door neighbor was a engineer, nuclear physicist at the plant. He was one of the people responsible for it not happening. He wasn't on shift when it did happen. And he's dead now, by the way. But I was very negative on nuclear power for quite some time after that incident, as you might imagine. I have since developed a much more nuanced view of it, much to the chagrin of certain people who like to give me shit about that position constantly. Pardon my Pink Floyd alarm clock. But that's just the way it is. On the other hand, 3 Mile Island, and for that matter, what happened at Fermi 1 didn't kill anybody. Okay, we've had Diablo Canyon out in California has had multiple problems with steam generators, which have the potential to release radioactive material. There have been multiple small releases, primarily of tritium, which is a natural byproduct of boiling pressurized water reactors. Tritium gets generated in the unit. Tritium, by the way, is although a lot of people scream about it, is not really all that dangerous. It's not at all dangerous if you don't eat it. The problem is you can ingest it because tritiated water chemically looks just like regular water. The thing is, it doesn't bioaccumulate, which is one of the primary danger markers. It's one of the reasons why it's not nearly as dangerous as a lot of people think it is. Being chemically, water, whether it's tritiated or not, being identical chemically to any other kind of water, if you drink it, it circulates through your system and you piss it out just like it turns over basically, just like every other kind of water. The kinds of things that are dangerous are those things that get taken up and concentrate. So strontium, for example, is dangerous because it gets taken up and gets treated much like calcium and potassium, and so you have things like that. They get stored, they incorporated into, for example, when it comes to calcium, of course, that's a big part of your bones, right? And so the potential for them to cause long-lasting harm, cancers and things like this is there. Iodine, which is a product of reactors, is only dangerous for a short period of time because the radioactive isotopes are very short-lived. However, only a few days. However, if there's a reactor accident, this is why they tell you to take iodine tablets and saturate your thyroid, because your thyroid preferentially takes up iodine and can give you thyroid cancer. So, this is, yeah. And of course, the people screaming about Fukushima, Fukushima Daiichi, there were two things there that happened, okay? And again, this goes back to cultural issues. And this is why I'm talking about it. Fukushima Daiichi was in an area that was known to be at risk of tsunamis and earthquakes. And because boiling water and pressurized water reactors require a large amount of fresh water that can be circulated for cooling purposes, their efficiency sucks if they don't have that. In other words, a water to air heat exchanger is inefficient compared to a water to water one. Just has to do with the specific heat capacity of water. And so as a result, all of these units, in order to be economically viable, have to be near large bodies of water. Well, Japan, being an island nation, has large bodies of water available, right? They're called oceans. However, Japan is also seismically active, which means that there's a risk of tsunamis and earthquakes. And so when the tsunami came, the dum-dums placed the switchgear for the reactor in a place where it could get flooded by the tsunami. Electrical equipment and water don't get along real well. That is why the meltdowns happened. Because even though they had two more units that were shut down at the time, but had working diesels, in other words, they had power on site. And this was one of the, during the first few hours, I said, why in the hell, because we have a shit ton of people over there, right, with our bases and everything else, which means we have all kinds of military equipment, including, by the way, nice big diesel generators. Why don't we stick a couple of them on the bottom of a skyhook and take them over there and since there's no utility power, provide emergency power. And the answer was, the reason why we weren't able to do that and prevent the meltdowns is that the switchgear was destroyed. And so taking this over and doing this did you no good. So, but who approved that design? More important to have electricity than to worry about the impact when something goes wrong. Same thing's true in the Philippines. Hell, the president of the Philippines who said, well, if you're not willing to kill people, you can't be president. You know what? You notice that didn't get very widely reported. That happens to be true, by the way. But in the United States, it would be the death of you as a politician if you made a statement like that. Duarte, on the other hand, he doesn't have any problem with it. It's a cultural thing, folks. It's a cultural thing. Okay? The Asians, the Africans, the South Americans, the people south of the American border towards Mexico, and as you go further south into Honduras and Guatemala, all these other places, they just don't see things the way we do. They just don't. Human life is just another thing. It's a cultural deal. It is a cultural deal, just like it is later on this morning, I'm going to need to take a crap. And when I need to take a crap, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go sit on the pot. And after I take my crap, by God, I'm going to make sure my butthole is clean, and I'm not going to use my fingers to do it. And then all of that is going to get flushed down the drain into a sanitary sewer. And if there's any coronavirus in there, it's going to end up in a place where it can't hurt anybody. And the rest of the world does not see it that way. This 3.4% thing, you need to understand a bunch of things with going that is going on here. One of them is that number is not, and I do mean not, in any way, shape, or form relevant to the number of cases. Those are relevant to the number of cases that end up in a hospital or a doctor's office and get tested thus far. China today supposedly only reported 119 cases. If you really believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. They're restarting their economy. If you really think that this is not going to start to take off again, you're dead wrong. We do not yet know if this virus is going to follow the seasonal patterns that other viruses follow, influenza specifically. In other words, it's going to become much less common, much less of a problem throughout the summer months, and then next year it's going to come roaring back when it starts to chill off again. We'll see. I hate being right. And this is an extraordinarily serious issue, and I'm very upset about this, actually. This thing out in Washington State, folks, if you want to know why the Bolsheviks and the American culture being destroyed is so dangerous, is so bad, you only need to look at what happened in Kirkland. You just have to look there, because there you have the Chinese model of, it's just humans. That's all it is. We don't have to actually pay attention to the surveillance of these things up front. By God, what did I say? You had a roughly 100 people in that nursing home, patients, okay? Not staff members, patients. And as soon as news broke that was one of the hotbeds of outbreak, I said, 10% of those people are going to be dead. Well, guess what? The count now at this point, I think, is 9. So, wasn't that far off, was I? And we're not done, I don't think. But what's even worse is that we've had thousands of people who have been seated out there that are now walking around with it, and they don't know it. And over the next week or so, some of them are going to get sick, and they've spread it to even more people. And this is all because we do not have the sort of strength of inculcation with regards to this particular aspect of things. Humans before others. Oh, I'm so offended that you're grilling on your porch. It smells, and that's terrible. I'm a vegan runner. Stuff some meat in your mouth, chickie. You know, what is with it, folks? If you want to go down the road that China has gone down with coronavirus, if you want to go down that road, if you want to go down what's probably going to happen in India, not being reported yet, but boy, oh boy, it's going to. How about Iran? How's that working out? How's that working out? We got the wishing well, and by God, you will be saved from coronavirus if you lick the monument. The guy in front of you has coronavirus. He licks the monument. You lick the monument. Guess what? You got it now, too. How is that any different than I actually slept with and had sex with everybody that was in the room? Well, you swapped genetic material with all of them. We still in this day and age do that sort of shit? Excuse me? You know, I've spent plenty of time in a Catholic church. And during the Lenten observances, there's a point where you kiss the feet of Jesus. Of course, on the cross, right? And you know what? Even when there isn't some disease going around, you know what they do between everybody that comes up to do it? They wipe it off with alcohol. Gee, I wonder why. You know, we used to do those rituals before we figured out that the disease model of how it happens. You know, there's these things called germs, viruses, and bacteria. Right. Before we figured all that stuff out, you want to bet that over in Europe, that the church was a fantastic spreader of disease and pestilence? Absolutely it was. How about the crazies in South Korea? It infected the whole damned congregation. Crazy religious cult. With absolutely no respect for what was going on in the next couple of nations over. And oh, by the way, they were doing this even though, still doing the same kind of thing, same kind of observances, even though right next door in China, we have an outbreak of a brand new... Excuse me? This is what happens when you don't put the right things first. It's a cultural thing, folks, above everything else. It's not fixable with money, just as I think we're going to find that out in India, sadly. It's not fixable with money. It's cultural. It takes generations to fix it. But we shall see. Again, me not scared when it comes to this thing, because, you know, even though the screaming is going on, there are rumors, and I'm not going to tell you where I got them from, but there are rumors, I've gotten it from multiple sources now, I've been emailed by a few people, that by the end of the week, probably Friday after the market closes, so a couple days, you're going to have a pandemic declared, which, by the way, I think is appropriate, because I think at that point you're going to have the deaths in multiple regions. We've already hit that. We've hit that criteria, folks. But you're going to have it declared, and then I think you're also going to have guidelines coming out of the CDC. And this again has been explicitly stated as a rumor that's flying around, that you're going to have explicit guidelines that say that all large office complexes, all places where there's a significant number of people, should, to the extent possible, have their people working from home, and people should not be leaving their house. You hear something like anything that sounds like that, I think you're going to see, there's already some evidence that this kind of thing, you know, there's memos going around in offices. If you have a corporate issued laptop, you must be taking it home with you. What is that? Why? Do you know why? Because that means that on short notice or no notice at all, the company's going to slam the doors and lock them at the office. Do you think it's coming? I do. Is that likely to instill some panic among people in the United States? Yeah, I would bet that very, very kind of sort of likely to happen, right? Still not scared here in the United States. But boy, oh boy, all those people from the third world nations in Italy, boy, are they getting hammered, aren't they? Isn't Italy getting hammered? What is so unique about Italy? Why is Italy getting hammered to the degree that they are? I wonder. Something to think about, folks. It's Wednesday. It is. Bernie Sanders getting trounced by the establishment that hates him. And by the way, recognizes that neither he... And one last thought on the political side. We'll go back to politics for 30 seconds. This is a very long podcast. Sorry about that. No, I'm not. Realize this. Joe Biden, advanced dementia, pretty obvious. Doesn't know the difference between his wife and his daughter. Doesn't know, can't correctly cite two sentences out of the Declaration of Independence. Oh man, this guy wants to be president of the United States. He's not going to be president of the United States. You're voting for a container. Folks, if this does not tell you everything you need to know about the state of corruption in this country, and how hard the schism is going to come when the checks bounce for health care, which they're going to by 2024. What you're getting right now with coronavirus is a dry run because the boogaloo is going to be on. And I was hoping we could find a way to avoid it. I don't see it happening anymore. It's sad, but it's true. Let me take a guy. Have a good day.